Good day everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Cailyn and this is Foundation First. Today I'm going to be doing another story time. And this story time is about my struggles with reading. So as I'll speak about in future episodes, this is not the focus of what we are talking about today. I have had many learning difficulties throughout my life. I have been diagnosed with ADHD when I was 11 years old. And this was the aha moment that my parents got as I struggled with reading from a very early age, from when we started to learn how to read. My struggle with reading started very early on. It will be very difficult to go right back to the start, but reading isn't something that came very naturally to me. Some children it does, others it doesn't. Something that I really struggled with was obviously remembering the letters and the sounds that are attached to them. My problem started very early on, where each child was leveled in their reading ability, and I very clearly was very far behind others, while others sped up a little bit more. Children went up and up in their levels of reading, where I leveled very slowly. When I was at school, every day you'd have reading homework, and it was something that after a long day of learning, I was absolutely exhausted with, and it was not something I wanted to do. I was tired, I got home, and I remember sitting with my father and him getting extremely frustrated at what I was reading because he didn't understand why I didn't grasp the information. I would guess by looking at the pictures, be able to sound words out, but then guess because I wasn't hearing the blending of the sounds. I remember that quite clearly. Because I found reading so difficult, and because I found it something that was quite negative and I didn't do well at, it was something that I lost motivation for very early on. I found it very tiring and I just eventually cut it off. I thought, this is not something I'm very good at, so I'll never be good at it, so that's just it, I'm writing it off. Unfortunately, you can't write it off completely because everybody needs to know how to read. I spent a lot of my life avoiding it as much as possible. Situations where I had to read in front of the class was extremely nerve-wracking. I would shake, and sometimes there would be moments where I'd almost be brought to tears. I had performance anxiety throughout my school career because I always thought that I was lesser than. I didn't want people to laugh at me. I didn't want people to see that I was doing something wrong, and didn't want them to realize how much I actually truly struggled. I think they figured it out. I think they knew. And that was something that I wanted to hide away from. I hid a lot at school. I was quiet and I was very much in the background as much as possible. I didn't want to be noticed. I didn't want to answer things. I didn't want to read aloud in front of people. And when I made mistakes and people laughed at me, it just reinforced the idea that this was something that I wasn't good at. People said you got to keep practicing. However, once that motivation was lost, it was lost. Eventually, as I got a little bit older, that's when I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was 11. And then through my years, struggled with school, bleeding into most subjects, and then eventually getting to grade 11 and having another learning assessment in order to get extra time on my exams. And that's when the educational psychologist came back with the conclusion that not only do I have ADHD, I have problems with visual processing and auditory processing. Meaning when I read, I struggle to process the information when I'm just hearing it. Very often I have to have multi-sensory input to be able to really grasp these ideas. Another thing that came up through that assessment was my reading level. When I took this reading level, I was in grade 11, meaning I was 7 in South Africa. It's the year that you turn 17. And when I was 17, it came back that I had the reading level of a grade 3. Now, at 17, being told that you have the reading level of a 9-year-old, it's certainly not the most encouraging. But I was somebody that tried to kind of have things bounce off of me as much as possible. That whole assessment, what that enabled for me was to get me to a point where I can be moved to a remedial school, which will be smaller and be able to assist me with the learning opportunities that will meet me where I was. This experience in itself, going to remedial school, really enabled me to be able to feel like I was in a space where I could be myself, especially being in a smaller school, and get to a point where I was working at my own level. Throughout my schooling career, I always was at the bottom end of the class. But going to a remedial school, I got the opportunity to really show my true colors and be able to reach a point where I was showing my capabilities. I always wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to be a teacher since I was 13. I didn't really know why at that point, but through that whole experience and going to a school which would meet me at my level and support me, made me realize the importance of education, specific education, and the importance of the school and the teachers involved. Eventually, I was able to go to university, and that's when I learned the wonders about educational instruction and the different ways that you can teach reading and writing. Many other things as well, but this story is about specifically reading. I learned that there are many different ways to teach reading and writing, and maybe if I was taught in this way, maybe I would have had a different outcome. Eventually, through many years of having to read and getting to a point where I didn't have to read for marks and there wasn't this pressure to read, I got to a point where I felt a little bit more motivated to read. I can read much better than a grade 3 now. I got through high school, I got through university, I got my degree. I not only can read really well, I can also teach children how to read from the very beginning. And you are a true expert of something when you know that you know it in its most basic and simplest form. Through my teaching career, starting off, I then went to different professional developments and I learned more ways how to deliver reading instruction to children, how to teach them how to read. This is where I really built up the knowledge and understanding of new and improved ways to teach reading and writing to children. However, when I moved to a different school, I learned how many teachers still truly don't understand how these beautiful and new ways of teaching reading and writing to young children are available to us. Still very old ways of teaching reading and writing are still embedded in our education environment, and this is preventing good students from being able to reach their full potential, just like I could have if I was provided this instruction when I was younger. Cutting out the nonsense when teaching reading and writing is very important, and this is what I learned through my career. Eventually, I got to a point where I was teaching teachers how to teach reading and writing and showing people best practice. I have done and do professional developments and trainings on how to teach reading and writing to young children, and I have some videos on that which you can go and check out. So this is a very interesting experience and a very interesting story because one of my specializations is understanding teaching reading and writing at a very strong and intricate level. And my journey is an interesting one because I started off struggling to read and write myself. Being somebody who struggled allows me to better understand children when they struggle. And it helps me to better explain to teachers when they work with children who struggle. It's often very difficult for people to understand and adults to understand when children struggle with things that we find so basic and so easy. But we're looking through our adult lens. We need to look through a child's lens, and we need to make it as simplistic as possible, allowing them to go through it seamlessly without the extra fluff that just makes it more complicated in an unnecessary way. So from going from somebody who struggled with reading and hated reading most of her life, now I'm at a point where I teach others how to teach reading and writing to enable children to get to a point where they are strong readers, confident readers, and motivated readers. Thank you so much for joining me on today's story time. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like. If you can relate to this video or have any questions, comment down below. I'd be happy to hear it. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in my next one.